You about Mark 13:32.
Is this about Yahweh?
Yes, it will be.
Oh, okay.
But it's also about Jesus. As you interpret Mark 13:32, did Jesus know the day and hour of his return?
In both Mark and the Matthean passage, the Son says that, he specifically says, no one knows, no man, no angel, nor the Son, only the Father.
Okay. So, right. And at what point then did Yahweh know the day and the hour?
Yahweh has always known the day and the hour. The Son knew the day and the hour before his incarnation. There is something about the incarnation that requires that knowledge to be limited, just as the glory of the one who was seen by Isaiah was limited during the incarnation.
Okay, so again, we see an important difference at this time, the time of that passage, between Jesus and Yahweh. Yahweh knows something Jesus doesn't know.
Is that a question?
According to Jesus.
Is that a question?
No, the question's coming.
No, sir, if you're going to make statements, then I get to respond to the statements. So you either ask questions, because you just confused Yahweh and the Father. I make the distinction, the New Testament makes the distinction between Father.
Yeah, but I think Dale's point, right, was that Jesus is not Yahweh in the same sense that the Father is Yahweh. That Jesus must be in a different sense. Like if Jesus is Yahweh, cannot be in the same sense as the way the Father is Yahweh. Because the Father, right, if Yahweh knows the day or the hour, then he knows it apart from human nature. So if he knows it apart from human nature, then you cannot appeal to human limitations or limited knowledge or infused knowledge or anything like that. You cannot even appeal to human nature, because the day and the hour is known through the property of omniscience, right? So it is known apart from human nature. Therefore, you cannot appeal to human nature, because it does not depend on it to begin with. And so that's why Jesus cannot be Yahweh in that sense, in the same sense that the Father is Yahweh, which is why I think Dale pretty much won this debate. So if Jesus is Yahweh in the sense, like in what sense? Like in the way that God is Yahweh, the Father? Or is Jesus Yahweh in a different sense? But then again, who is actually the Yahweh that Jesus is being in the flesh, right? A man. Obviously, that still means the Father is Yahweh, even if he is revealed through the Spirit of Yahweh or the Son of Yahweh, right? This is the name and the deity and all that comes from the Father, right? The main one. And let me see.
Son, and Spirit. You are trying to confuse those distinctions, and please don't just make a statement and then think you can go on without.
You want to say the Father is identified with God, okay? In your view, is Mark a Trinitarian? And if so, why doesn't he mention the Spirit here? Because if he says only the Father knows, that implies that the Son doesn't know, yes, but it also implies that the Spirit doesn't know.
First of all, Mark doesn't get to edit what Jesus says, so you're asking me why.
Dr. White, the one person Jesus, did he die on the cross?
Yes.
Did Yahweh die on the cross?
Again, if we're talking about Yahweh as to the very being of God, shared by the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, no, the being of God did not die on a cross. The Son, who took on a perfect human nature, gave that perfect life upon the cross to redeem God's people.
So the Son died on the cross and Yahweh didn't?
The Lord of glory was crucified according to Paul's own terminology, but that is specifically in regards to the incarnate one, not to the Father, not to the Spirit.
Yes, of course, it's the man in Romans 5 and many other places that died.
Yes, of course. That's what we believe.
Yeah, so did the human nature die or the eternal divine person?
No, it was the human nature that was given. It was human nature that died. You can only, when Paul uses the terminology, they crucified the Lord of glory. You can't crucify the Lord of glory unless the Lord of glory has taken such a form in which that can become a meaningful thing of substitution.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's why the non-Chalcedonians, they see Chalcedonians as Nestorians, because they create a distinction or a separation between the divine person and his human nature, which is why one died and the other did not. Even if it was an unbroken union, it doesn't change that those are two different subjects in an unbroken union. And then he said something else about and then the logic of the God-man. Like, in order to see its absurdities, like, you just apply the logic of the two natures simultaneously. Because here James White was talking about how the Lord of glory cannot be crucified unless he was in a human nature, right? So it can be said that, just like in the incarnation, right, God remained God and became man. It can also be said that God was crucified and not crucified, and God is ignorant and not ignorant, right? The same person. In fact, I think Dale said something about that there are two persons, right? Yeah, that there are two persons, but specifically there are two sons, like two different sons. One that is crucified and one that is not. according to the two natures of the single person, the single Son, how he's being split between his two natures, how he can be said to be divinely omniscient and humanly ignorant, like at the same time. Because remember, he never ceased to be God, and so you can't just pick verses when he's manifesting divinity, he's God, but when he's dying, he's man. No, he has to be God and man throughout the whole thing, not just at certain parts. So it sounds logical when they say it like one thing at a time. It's like God, then man, but no, it's supposed to be God and man all the time, unceasingly. So you could say it's sort of like omnisciently ignorant, basically. That's how absurd it sounds. And so, yeah, that's why I said like, what was the other thing? Yeah, just applying the logic of those two natures to a single hypostasis at the same, it's like simultaneously, it makes it seem really absurd. It exposes it for the absurdity that it is.
For his people who are united to him.
Yes, and we read repeatedly that it was a man who died. So in your view, the human nature that died is a man?
Yes,
And a man, by definition, is a human person?
If you want it, whatever terminology you want to use, I prefer biblical terminology. Like I said, they crucified the Lord of glory. That's the terminology I'll stick with.
That's just what anthropos and aner and man mean. They mean a human person who's male. Right, so you have an eternal divine son, and then you also have a human person. The first one didn't die, but the second one did die.
We believe in the hypostatic union, that Jesus Christ is one person with two natures, and that he gave that perfect life in behalf of his people, yes.
And we just mentioned two different persons, and now you're back to one person?
I don't know what you're talking about when you mention two different persons. Unless you're talking about the Father and the Son, yes, of course, we distinguish
one,
the Father.
One more time, there's an eternal divine person who can't die on your view. And then you also said there's a complete human nature, which is a man who can die. There's your two persons.
He took on a perfect human nature, and that is what died upon the cross, yes.
Okay, so it wasn't the death of a man, unlike the New Testament repeatedly says. It was the death of a complete human nature.
I don't even have any idea what you're talking about when you say it was the death of a man. He was truly a man. He was born of the virgin. He walked, he ate, so on and so forth. But that man had not existed eternally. It was the Son who had existed eternally, who was the creator of all things, as we saw in Revelation 5, worshipped by all creation.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, wow.
You want to say this is not exegesis, but I mean, you need to go back to the exegetical drawing board if you have a man and an eternal divine person.
You just can't follow that rule, can you?
Has Dr. White, has Yahweh ever been tempted to do wrong?
Is Yahweh ever tempted to do wrong? As God, no.
Is that a yes or a no? As God knows, that's just no?
Well, because obviously, Bible teaches us that the second person of the Trinity became flesh and experienced temptation as we all did. So we just allow all the Bible to speak, not just certain parts.
Right, so Yahweh has never been tempted to do wrong, but Jesus obviously has, according to Mark and Matthew.
Because the incarnation, the very thing that you don't accept. Right.
Yes, and what part did they tell you that it was because of the incarnation that Jesus...
John 1:14. The Word became flesh, dwelt among us. And then, of course, the description in Hebrews chapter 2 of Jesus being the one who has brothers and his death is in behalf.
Yeah, but the Word was God and remained God. So you could also say, because of the logic of the God-man, that the Word did not become man but remained God. I mean, that is literally the logic of the God-man. If he remained God, it is improper to what he is being in his human nature, which is a man with human experiences, which is totally improper to being what he remained in his divine nature, which is God the Son. So that's why I said that it is improper to one nature, right? One nature, what you say he is in his one nature, is improper to what he's being in his other nature. That's why I say it's a logical absurdity, which is what Dale was trying to get at. I mean, all this confusion can be solved very simply. How you can avoid a lot of heresies, like a lot of Christological heresies, like modalism, Arianism, Nestorianism, what else? Apollinarianism, where you could say that a human person experiences his own human mind, his own human ignorance, could be Yahweh in some sense, can die, can manifest power of God, knowledge of God, understand those kind of things, right? Like have a divine origin. Yeah, a human person can be all of that. Could solve all this confusion if you just understood how he was begotten, being a true man, like a human person. Like that would literally clarify a lot of confusion. But they want him to be God, which is what's creating all this. It's what's creating all this confusion. Even though it can be solved very easily just by understanding how he is a human person, or even a unique human person, or even a new, like, federal head or something. because he's supposed to be the atom of God, an historical human person. But anyway, it was a really good debate. I enjoyed it. But and just my thoughts I'm sharing on the debate. And so, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe. Thank you, and God bless.